Today, we are talking fantasy football. We are talking top 10 Dynasty rookie wide receivers post-draft. Before we get into it, if you guys could, go down and subscribe to the channel. It is the #1 way to support me. It's totally free, but I don't want to waste any of your time. Let's hop right into it with our first player, and this should be no surprise to anybody. It's Jaxon Smith-Njigba, and Jaxon Smith-Njigba, a phenomenal player who finds himself in a much better landing spot than a lot of people are giving him credit for. I mean, for one, the Seahawks have been known to produce great wide receiver seasons between two wide receivers, and while yes, right now they do have DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, there are going to be three great wide receivers in this offense. In the long term, we're going to see Jaxon Smith-Njigba overtake Tyler Lockett simply because Tyler Lockett is going into his age 31 season. DK Metcalf was just signed. He most likely will be the wide receiver 1 for years to come, but operating as the wide receiver 2 behind DK Metcalf is great, especially considering I think Jaxon Smith-Njigba will most likely lead this team in targets a few years down the line. DK Metcalf, more of that deep ball type of guy. Jaxon Smith-Njigba, more of the slot type of wide receiver. That's why I do love Jaxon Smith-Njigba, especially as my #1 wide receiver. He's in a tier of his own personally. Even though his landing spot could have been a bit better, I would have preferred the Chargers. I would have preferred the Chiefs, obviously. There were a few teams I would have liked better, but either way, that's Jaxon Smith-Njigba. Moving it down a tier, though, we do have Quentin Johnston as my #2 wide receiver, and I know there is some debate between him and Jordan Addison, who I will get to in a second, but either way, Quentin Johnston, still a great wide receiver, somebody who had over 1,000 yards, somebody who was the second wide receiver taken off of the board, and a player who landed on the best team. I mean, I know, again, the situation is similar to JSN where it's, oh my god, they have Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. What is Quentin Johnston to do? One of those two players will be off the team in 2024. Yes, this year it is a little bit murky, but we are talking Dynasty. We aren't talking redraft. In Dynasty, he is going to be the wide receiver 1 on this team in 2 years, which is absolutely fine by me. Keenan Allen most likely will be off the team in 2024, or Mike Williams, because if they cut Keenan Allen in 2024, they save $23 million. They save another $20 million by cutting Mike Williams. They will cut one of those two people. That's why they drafted Quentin Johnston as the second wide receiver. They had the choice to draft Jordan Addison. They had the choice to draft Zay Flowers. They went out and they got Quentin Johnston. That proves that he is a scheme fit. He is somebody that's very fast, and this offense has needed speed for years now, ever since Justin Herbert has joined the team. That's why I love Quentin Johnston. Moving on, we do have Jordan Addison, and I think Jordan Addison, a phenomenal player. Somebody who was a Blitnikoff Award winner, having over 1,500 yards 2 years ago with Kenny Pickett. Does regress this season at USC with Caleb Williams, a quarterback, which is a little bit of a worrying sign. But somebody who can get open, somebody with the ability to separate like Jordan Addison, I don't think will have much of a problem at the NFL level. Yes, he is small, and that is a small knock on him, but I think he does find himself in a pretty good situation where he doesn't have to be the wide receiver 1. You do have Justin Jefferson in this offense creating tons of space. You also have TJ Hawkinson as potentially the wide receiver 2 in year 1. So Jordan Addison can be operating as technically the wide receiver 3 in this offense. And this is an offense that has hyper targeted the wide receiver 1, the wide receiver 2 for years. Look at Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson. And I think this does pretty much eradicate KJ Osborne's upside. I mean, that's pretty much a certainty now at this point. But either way, Jordan Addison stepping into a great situation as the wide receiver 2 in this offense, which I think is fine. Sure, you don't have the ceiling necessarily, but I think the floor is great for him. I think he could be an 1,100-1,200 yard wide receiver with Justin Jefferson reaching those upper echelon type of seasons, the 1,600, 1,700, 1,800 yard type of seasons. I don't think this knocks Justin Jefferson's stock much because Justin Jefferson, I think Addison does find himself in a better landing spot than some people are giving him credit for. But let's move on now to my next player, and this is another teardrop. It is Zay Flowers. And I've seen a pretty wide range of thoughts on Zay Flowers, ranging from now that he's a first-round pick, he deserves to be in this tier with Quentin Johnston, with Jordan Addison. And then I've seen people on the other side saying Zay Flowers should not be a first-round pick. He stayed all 4 years at Boston College. I personally think the truth lands somewhere in the middle, and that's why I do have him in a tier of his own without any other wide receivers, because I think simply he should be the 4th wide receiver taken off the board every single time, no matter what. I think Quentin Johnston and Jordan Addison should be the 2 and 3, JSN should be the 1, and then Zay Flowers should be the 4 every single time. he lands himself in a pretty good offense. You do have the Ravens, who historically have not passed the ball much, but we have seen a couple of instances where players have had success in this offense. I mean, we're talking Mark Andrews with a 1,300-yard season. We're talking Marquise Hollywood-Brown, who had a successful season with over 1,100 yards 2 years ago before he was traded to the Cardinals. I think this is a pretty good offense for wide receiver. Well, it's not perfect. Well, it's not going to be. The Chiefs, the Chargers, the Bills, these teams with elite passing upside, there still is passing upside in this offense with Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson still throws a great deep ball, which I think is one of Zay Flowers' specialties. Even though he is a slot wide receiver, his vertical presence in the slot is something that has to keep teams honest, and I think that will match up pretty well with Zay Flowers. I think he is a great scheme fit with the Ravens, but personally to me, I just can't justify taking him over Jordan Addison or Quentin Johnston under any circumstance. Let me know down below what you guys think about that, because I know some people do love Zay Flowers, and I'd love to hear the bull case for him, because I think he's a great wide receiver. But I just don't think he's as good of a wide receiver as Quentin Johnston and Jordan Addison from a prospect perspective, and that's why I do have him here at 4. Either way though, let's move on to my next player, and that is Rashee Rice. And I think Rashee Rice is somebody who definitely deserves to be soaring up these boards now, especially considering, for one, Patrick Mahomes. He lands on the Chiefs, which is just about the best place you could land for a wide receiver. Not only that, he gets second round draft capital, which I feel like a lot of people are overlooking. I still see Rashee Rice listed on places like Keep Trade Cut as barely even being a top 24 rookie pick, which personally to me makes no sense. The Chiefs trade up in the second round to go and get him. He's the third wide receiver taken in the second round behind only Jonathan Mingo and Jayden Reed. He went ahead of guys like Jalin Hyatt, Cedric Tillman, Marvin Mims, and yet I see a lot of these players getting significantly more buzz than Rashee Rice, despite the Chiefs going out and trading up to get Rashee Rice. Yes, I think a lot of the reason is because people did not like his prospect profile. I mean, this is somebody who had a 9.52, I believe it was, RAS. So for one, he's extremely athletic at the position, and two, he dominated his senior season, having over 1,300 yards at SMU, which I know it is a little bit concerning considering his breakout was not until his senior year. But at the same time, I do have faith in this Chiefs coaching staff, Andy Reid, to draft the best players possible. And I know they've had busts in years past. We're talking Sky Moore, we're talking Clyde Edwards-Helaire. But every year is a new year. We shouldn't be looking at those players saying Rashee Rice is gonna follow in their footsteps. We simply don't know. And yet this wide receiver room is absolutely desolate. They have Sky Moore, who I just mentioned, Kadarius Toney, and Marquez Valdes-Scantling. If Rashee Rice is able to assert himself as the wide receiver 1 in this offense, the sky is the limit, and yet most people are passing him up for Jonathan Mingo in a completely unproven offense. I really like Rashee Rice. I think this is going to be somebody who surprises at the next level, and people are going to say, oh, he was on the Chiefs, we knew it was going to happen. Then why is he not going early on in the second round? I don't understand it. Let me know down below. I'm not somebody who loved his prospect profile, but at the same time, the Chiefs drafted him, they traded up to get him, and he had a ridiculously good RAS score. Next up, we do have Jayden Reed, and I know I was just ragging on him a little bit, talking about Rashee Rice, but Jayden Reed does find himself in a pretty good landing spot as well. He does end up on the Green Bay Packers as the wide receiver 2 here, which I think is absolutely a fine landing spot because you have Christian Watson, and then realistically, the gate is wide open for a wide receiver 2. I know a lot of people liked Romeo Doubs last season. I think he had a fine season, but he proved he's not going to be anything special at the NFL level. And if you're looking at that, they go out and draft a wide receiver in the second round for Jordan Love. And yes, Jordan Love probably not going to be the quarterback that Aaron Rodgers was the last 3 seasons, a 2-time MVP. But at the same time, I think the Packers know what they have in Jordan Love, and this could be a great quarterback in the NFL level. I mean, they would not have moved on from Aaron Rodgers, again, a 2-time MVP in the last 3 seasons, if they didn't have at least some faith in Jordan Love to produce at the next level. That's why I have more faith in Jordan Love than I think some other people do, even though I know it's pretty much a 50-50 shot, like the quarterback position in general. I think that Jordan Love is stepping into a better situation than a lot of other quarterbacks. I mean, you have Aaron Jones. Yes, he is getting older, but still a pretty good running back. A borderline great offensive line, a good defense, and now you're getting another round 2 wide receiver to pair up with Christian Watson, a round 2 wide receiver in his own right who had a phenomenal rookie year. I think this is a really interesting landing spot for Jayden Reed, and I think somebody who went under the radar at Michigan State, but now getting second round draft capital is phenomenal. Moving on though, we do have Marvin Mims, And I did like the film on Marvin Mims a lot. He was actually one of my favorite players to watch coming out into the NFL draft. Now he finds himself on the Broncos. And I think this is a better landing spot than some people are giving him credit for. I'm imagining that either Courtland Sutton, KJ Hamler, or Jerry Jeudy gets traded. Probably not going to be Jerry Jeudy. They just picked him up on his 5th-year option. So I'm narrowing it down to between Courtland Sutton and KJ Hamler, one of the two. If I had to guess, I would probably say Courtland Sutton. I mean, his impact on this team was pretty much non-existent this past year. Somebody going in 3rd round, 4th round of underdog fantasy drafts and completely busts. I mean, it was a terrible performance for Courtland Sutton, whoever picked him. I pretty much was drafting him in no leagues. Pretty glad about it. Either way, I think Marvin Mims is somebody who lands himself in a good situation. He did get 2nd round draft capital, just barely, but still squeaks out with that 2nd round draft capital, which I think is a good sign for him. Also, again, I just really like his tape. He doesn't have to be the wide receiver 1 right away because you have Jerry Jeudy, because you potentially have Courtland Sutton. And this offense should take a step forward under Sean Payton. I mean, we're not going to be seeing arguably the worst coach in the league in Nathaniel Hackett coaching them again. You go from a completely unproven head coach to one of the best head coaches in the last 10 years in Sean Payton. So I really like this team now. I mean, I think they are going to be a sneaky good team, and I think the Marvin Mims draft pick does kind of solidify that a little bit. Moving on, though, we do have Jonathan Mingo. And Jonathan Mingo is one of the most polarizing players I have seen in the draft. I've seen a lot of people absolutely loving Jonathan Mingo. I mean, it's hard not to like his prospect profile from an RAS standpoint. Somebody who dominated the combine. I believe his RAS was 9.85. My problem with Jonathan Mingo, and why I'm not necessarily in on Jonathan Mingo as much as some other people, is because he didn't have production at the collegiate level. I think targets are an earned metric, especially at the collegiate level, and there was no reason that with his frame, he should not be getting a ton of targets. And yet when I watch him, you watch his film, you watch his highlights, you don't really see him getting separation much on the ball. I mean, you see him make these fantastic Randy Moss type of catches, but at the same time, if you're not getting separation on these guys who are not that great at the collegiate level, how are you going to expect to get separation at the NFL level? And the thing is, if you are just getting a really go up and get it guy, but the go up and get it guy is not 6'4", not 235, I am a tiny bit concerned with Jonathan Mingo. With all that being said, he did go 39th in the draft, which is the 5th wide receiver off the board, behind only the guys who went 4 in a row, Zay Flowers, JSN, and the likes. So he does get pretty good draft capital going early on in the 2nd round. Not only that, this Panthers depth chart is pretty wide open. You have Adam Thielen, you have DJ Chark, but that's really it. Tyrese Marshall, proven he's pretty much a bust at this point. DJ Chark has had one great season under Gardner Minshew, but that's it. Adam Thielen is aging out. I imagine he only gets worse this season. He only goes down from his 740 yards last year. So I think Jonathan Mingo, interesting to take a shot on. I'm still taking a shot on him if he falls to this range, but I do have him at the bottom of this tier for a reason. Either way, let's move on to my last tier, and these players both went to the same school. That probably gives it away. It is Jalin Hyatt and Cedric Tillman, and I think both these guys do deserve to be in the same tier. I mean, they go back-to-back in the NFL draft. Let's have them back-to-back on the tier list. I'll start with Jalin Hyatt because I think he is a little bit higher for me personally. I do like Jalin Hyatt as a player. I liked him a lot coming out. I thought he was going to be an early 2nd round type pick. Saw a lot of buzz in the 1st. Wasn't really expecting that as much with the other wide receiver talent on the board. Either way, falls beyond the 2nd round and lands himself in the 3rd round to the New York Giants. And I think this New York Giants situation as a fan is pretty good. I mean, there isn't really that much wide receiver competition in terms of star power. There's quite obviously no Justin Jeffersons in this offense, but you do have a lot of depth that may compete for targets. Guys like Darius Slayton, guys like Isaiah Hodgins. We signed Paris Campbell. We signed Jamison Crowder. I mean, there's just so many bodies in this wide receiver room that I am a little bit concerned about volume, and also I'm a little concerned about volume with Hyatt because he is more of a speed type of wide receiver. I think he is going to operate better as a real life player than he is for fantasy, which, I mean, honestly has happened in years past with these burner type guys like John Ross, guys like Henry Ruggs, who end up being decoys for their quarterback to maybe throw there once a game. But realistically, it's to drag the safety out and get these other wide receivers a ton more open. I think that will be more Jalin Hyatt's role, especially considering he really doesn't have the most developed route tree. out of all these wide receivers, and I think that is why he ended up falling to the 3rd round. But the speed is definitely there. The opportunity is definitely there because he is the best wide receiver in this room right now, aside from maybe Wan'Dale, but we don't even know. Wan'Dale coming off a really serious injury. So I think Jalin Hyatt is probably the best wide receiver in this room. You do have Darren Waller too, who probably will be dragging targets away. Either way though, I think Jalin Hyatt does find himself in a good situation. We'll have to see what happens with this Giants offense, and I think there is a decent amount of question marks, but I like Daniel Jones as a quarterback. I think Jalin Hyatt, a good wide receiver, and somebody who could be higher than this in rankings. I totally would understand that, but I think with the draft capital, with the landing spot, with the fact that he's probably going to be a better NFL wide receiver than a fantasy wide receiver, I have to have him here. Moving on, I do have his teammate, Cedric Tillman, and Cedric Tillman, I think a pretty good wide receiver as well. Somebody who a lot of people thought was going to be better than Jalin Hyatt, and when he played, he was great at the collegiate level. I think the Browns getting him is also a pretty good sign, considering I think Deshaun Watson could easily be a top 5 quarterback in the league yet again. I mean, this is somebody who every single time he has played a full season, he has finished as the quarterback 5. Meaning that if he's able to return to what he did for 3 years in a row at the NFL level, there's going to be a crap ton of fantasy points in this offense. I mean, we're going to see Amari Cooper pretty heavily involved, Elijah Moore pretty heavily involved, Donovan Peoples-Jones pretty heavily involved, and now you bring in Cedric Tillman, he's going to be pretty heavily involved as well. I think this team has a pretty good wide receiver core, and my problem with Tillman is the fact that there is a good amount of competition. But Amari Cooper right now, going to be 29 years old in 1 month. And not only is he going to be 29 years old, I think the main gripe with Amari Cooper is that he's had so much wear and tear on the body already. I mean, he's been in the league since 2015, which is longer than a majority of wide receivers, despite him being so young, just because he came into the league so young. Either way, I think Amari Cooper probably will age out sooner than these other wide receivers who came into the league much later. Guys like Cooper Kupp, who, despite being a similar age, came into the league years later, meaning their body has taken less wear and tear than a guy like Amari Cooper's. So I think there is potential for Cedric Tillman in the long term to be a top producer in this offense, but right now, year 1, not really going to have the greatest amount of production in this offense. Also did go in the 3rd round. Overall, I think Cedric Tillman's landing spot is pretty good. There is potential, but there's also potential for him to completely fall on his face. Let me know what you guys think down below about everything, and subscribe to the channel. It is the #1 way to support me. Either way, guys, that's going to be it from me. Hope you did enjoy the video. As always, have a good day, a good night, and a good life.